Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today I'll be reviewing the new Defacement album, Doomed. Doomed is the fourth album from the Dutch death metal band Defacement, who recently have slowly made their way onto my radar, with this album particularly grabbing my attention after having read quite a handful of reviews that definitely made me want to listen. And as simple and even as basic as this album can be as far as death metal goes, I think there's still a lot to be said for that, as it basically is just 40 straight minutes of pure, raw, uncut, dissonant death metal. And I think that despite how intense this album can be, for the most part, it is actually pulled off really well, as there is still a reasonably wide range of styles and influences that they use, or at least as much as they can, for music of this kind of nature. And I do find that at pretty much any point in the album, I do find myself at least somewhat interested and captivated in what they're doing. I think consistently one of the best features of this album absolutely has to be the riffing, as some of the guitar playing on this album is just absolutely insane and some of the most dynamic work I've heard, and they just pull out some of the most dynamic styles I've heard in death metal. I do also quite like the way that the album is paced. I think that's a very important aspect of an album as intense as this one. I think that the opening ambient song Mournful actually works really well, just as it pulls out a lot of really great and well-textured sounds that still kind of alludes to the absolute insanity that's about to happen on the second song. And I think overall it just does a great job at preparing you for what's about to happen over the next 40 minutes. And then the first proper full song, Portrait, wastes absolutely no time getting straight into it. This song for its entire runtime is just absolutely insane and brutal and just ridiculous in every way, and I just love everything about that. Guitar riffing is nothing short of incredible, with the insane amount of speed and intensity that it's being played with. And then you also have the slightly more dissonant moments as well as the much more airy guitar sounds as well that come in, and I think all of them just come together and sound amazing. And it really does feel like on this song that every instrument is being played with such an immense force that at times it's even difficult to tell one instrument from the next. And I think that particularly towards the end of the song, despite that insane chaos, there is still somewhat of a sense of melody, which I'm not entirely sure exactly how they managed to pull that off, but they did, and I think it sounds incredible. And then Unexplainable continues a lot of these sounds and styles present on Portrait, but I think that this song overall just has a much better sense of structure and progression. I think this is one of those songs that really does reward you for listening to the whole thing, as it does just feel more epic as it goes further into it, but each moment does still bring something unique to the table that all of the others don't. I think that the very brief interlude, I think, is also a great moment on this song that does feel very necessary for the pacing. Obviously, with this being just such an intense style of music, that it's important to have little moments like this, but I do still really like that despite how soft and well textured this moment is, the very faint death metal screams in the background I think are a really cool little addition. And then after that, for the song outro, it just again goes completely insane with some of the best guitar riffing and vocals I've heard from this band ever. And then Forlorn, I think, does just feel like somewhat of a continuation of the interlude on Unexplainable, which I guess is fine, like it still sounds okay, but I just think that pacing wise, this is quite a weird decision, I think, given that this album is already giving you more soft and interlude-y kind of moments within the songs themselves. And then so to just have this entire 2.5 minute long interlude after you've already just had an interlude in the song before, it is just a little bit strange, I think. And then after that you have Worthless, which pretty much does just get straight back into it, and I feel like at this point in the album it has kind of proven everything it needs to prove. It's a very simple and straightforward death metal project with no gimmicks, and all you can really kind of do at this point is just sit along and enjoy the ride. Although I will say on this particular song, I do think that the riffing is again absolutely incredible. And having said that, I think that there are still a handful of really solid moments even on the latter half of the album, and I do find that at this point it has maybe just burnt itself out a little bit, with many of the interludes just kind of being squeezed quite near the beginning of the project. And there are still lots of absolutely fantastic individual songs and moments here. I just think that the pacing maybe could have been moved around a little bit. I do still absolutely love the much heavier bass presence on Unrecognized, which just gives this song a much darker tone, and I think that's also really well represented in the vocal style too. I also definitely can't go without mentioning the drumming on this track, which to be fair has been consistently incredible for the entire runtime of the album, but I think that just particularly on this track, obviously you have the much bigger bass presence, which also brings out the drumming, I think, too. And then of course you do still have plenty of moments on the song where the guitar playing is just absolutely incredible and just some of the most crazy and dynamic work they've done on the project so far. And then Absent, I think, delivers a pretty good ending to the album. I think that this track coming straight after an interlude is definitely a great thing too, given that the latter half of the album, like I've said, can feel a bit too intense, I think. So putting this closing track, which I think is by far one of the most intense and dissonant songs on the album, right after an interlude was definitely the right call to make. I think that the very repetitive guitar playing in combination with the super intense drumming is incredible, and really just helps to build this insane and dissonant atmosphere that the song has. And I think that despite how wild and unpredictable this track overall is, I really do just love the experience of listening to each part float in in and out of one another, with there overall still being a reasonable amount of diversity in the styles it shows off. And I think that it just manages to make quite a solid ending for the album, despite it being very abrupt. But to be honest, for an album of this kind of style, I think that's about as good of an ending as it can have. And so I think that outside of the overall pacing issues, I think that this is absolutely one of the best and most unique death metal albums I've heard this decade, with there just being such an incredible selection of styles that they use throughout the runtime of the album. And I think that the only real problem I have with it is just the pacing of the interludes. Like, I see what they were going for, but I think that they're just not quite spread out enough, and in a way almost even feel a little bit forced, as the album does feel very black and white in the sense that you either have crazy intense death metal or just a nice soft ambient interlude. And I think that just having slightly better flow between those moments would do this album wonders, as well as obviously, like I've said, just spreading out the interludes a little bit more. Which is why this album will be getting a 7 out of 10 from me. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.